When Emily and I decided to move to Willow Creek, we were looking for a new life, far from the noise and hustle of the big city. Our old life in New York was frantic and exhausting. The incessant noises, the daily rush, and the lack of time for ourselves wore us down to the point where we craved a radical change. So, when we found a cozy house in a small, welcoming town, we didn't hesitate. The house was everything we could wish for, located on a quiet street, with a white fence and a well-kept garden. It looked like something out of an old movie. The interior was even more charming, with its wooden walls, a fireplace promising cozy winter nights, and a porch that opened to a stunning view of the surrounding green hills. It was the perfect refuge, a place where we could rebuild our lives and maybe start a family. In the first days, we dedicated our time to unpacking and making the house truly ours. Each box unpacked was a step toward leaving the past behind. Emily took care of the decorative details, placing paintings and photos in strategic locations, while I focused on assembling furniture and ensuring everything was working perfectly. It was hard work, but rewarding. The community of Willow Creek welcomed us with open arms. Our neighbors, the Johnsons, were the first to greet us. Mary Johnson, a friendly lady with gray hair, brought a welcome cake and told us stories about the town. Her husband, Bill, was a robust and friendly man, always willing to help with anything we needed. There was something comforting about how everyone seemed to know and care for each other. Our first weekend in town was marked by a community event in the main square. It was a local fair with craft stalls, typical foods, and games for the children. The atmosphere was joyful, and the people's laughter filled the air. Emily and I strolled through the stalls, chatting with residents and getting to know our new home better. We also met Sheriff Thompson, a cordial man with an impressive mustache, who assured us that the town was a safe and peaceful place. Gradually, we began to feel like part of the community. Emily joined a gardening group, and I started attending a book club at the local library. The nights were calm, filled with the distant sound of crickets and the rustling of trees in the wind. Sometimes, we would sit on the porch with a glass of wine, just enjoying the silence and each other's company. It seemed we had finally found the peace we had been searching for. Willow Creek was a place where we could start anew, where our dreams could flourish without the shadow of the past. However, this sense of security would soon be tested in ways we could never have imagined. Little did we know that, in the shadows of our perfect new life, something sinister was approaching, ready to turn our tranquility into a living nightmare. The first signs that something was wrong began subtly, almost imperceptibly. In the first few weeks, the tranquility of Willow Creek seemed unshakable, but soon the peace we found in the small town began to be disturbed. It all started with phone calls in the middle of the night. First, I thought it was a mistake. The phone would ring around 2 or 3 in the morning, interrupting our sleep. The first time I answered, there was nothing but a disturbing silence on the other end of the line. Must be a wrong number, I thought, hanging up and going back to bed. However, the calls continued. On the third consecutive night, I answered with a mix of irritation and curiosity. This time, instead of silence, I heard heavy, slow breathing. My hairs stood on end instantly. "Who is this?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. There was no answer, just the rhythmic, unsettling breathing until the person abruptly hung up. I told Emily the next morning. She suggested it could be someone playing a prank, maybe bored teenagers. We tried to ignore it and go on with our lives, but the calls continued, becoming more disturbing each time. The breathing grew heavier, almost animalistic, and on one occasion, an inaudible whisper seemed to form words I couldn't understand. Our nocturnal tranquility was irreparably shaken. We started to sleep poorly, waking up multiple times during the night. Fear and anxiety began to creep into our days, like a persistent shadow we couldn't shake off. Then the letters began to arrive. The first time I found a letter in the mailbox, I didn't think much of it. It was a simple envelope with no return address. I opened it, and immediately, my stomach turned. The paper inside contained only a few short phrases, but the content was disturbing. "I know where you live. I'm watching you." I took the letter inside, showing it to Emily. She paled as she read the words, her hand trembling slightly. "Who would do something like this?" she asked, her voice laden with fear. We tried to rationalize, thinking it could be a bad joke. But when the second letter arrived, our fear intensified. This one contained personal details that no one but us should know. Our daily schedules, small conversations we had on the porch, even the name of our cat, Whiskers. Each new letter brought a growing sense of dread. The threats were veiled, but the message was clear. We were being watched, surveilled in our own home. Whoever it was knew too much about us, more than should be possible. The feeling of being watched intensified every day, and we began to distrust everyone around us. The line between paranoia and reality started to blur, and every friendly neighbor now seemed like a potential suspect. Our marriage also began to feel the impact. The sleepless nights and constant stress created tension between us. Small arguments became big fights, and the love that had united us seemed to fray under the weight of fear. As we tried to figure out who was behind this and why, the feeling that we couldn't trust anyone, maybe not even each other, became almost unbearable. Something malevolent was surrounding us, and each passing day made it harder to distinguish between friend and foe, reality and paranoia. The growing fear led us to seek help at the local police station. Emily and I went together, hoping Sheriff Thompson would have some answers or at least some guidance on how to proceed. The interior of the station was modest, with old furniture and the strong smell of coffee permeating the air. We sat in plastic chairs as we waited to be attended to. When we finally entered the sheriff's office, Thompson greeted us with a cordial smile, but I noticed a shadow of skepticism in his eyes. I explained the situation, describing the disturbing calls and threatening letters in detail. Emily, beside me, added information, her trembling voice betraying the fear we both felt. "I understand you're scared," the sheriff began, intertwining his fingers on the desk. "But believe me, we've seen things like this before. Could just be a prank. Bored teenagers, maybe. We don't have many serious crimes in Willow Creek. This doesn't feel like a prank," I insisted, holding one of the threatening letters. "Whoever it is knows personal things about us. Our schedules, our conversations, even our cat's name." Thompson sighed, taking the letter from my hands and briefly analyzing it. "I'll file a report and have an officer patrol the area more frequently. But honestly, we don't have many resources for cases like this. I'll do my best." We left the station with a feeling of frustration and helplessness. Emily was visibly shaken, and I felt powerless. We needed to do something on our own. That's when I decided to install security cameras around the house. I spent the next afternoon scouring electronic stores, looking for the best system our budget would allow. I bought several cameras, cables, and a digital video recorder. Emily watched silently as I installed everything, her restless hands reflecting her anxiety. I placed cameras in strategic points: the front entrance, the backyard, the porch, and even inside the house, covering windows and main doors. The feeling of being watched now had a new element. We were also watching. In the first few nights after installing the cameras, I spent hours monitoring the live footage. Sitting in the living room, I watched every movement captured by the lenses. At first, everything seemed normal. The breeze swaying the trees, Whiskers exploring the garden, and occasional neighbors passing by. Then, on the third night, something appeared. It was around 2 in the morning when I saw a hooded figure on the backyard camera. My heart raced as I adjusted the focus. The figure moved slowly, almost deliberately, as if knowing it was being filmed. The person stopped near one of the windows and looked directly at the camera before disappearing into the darkness. I woke Emily, and together we watched the recording several times. She was pale, her eyes wide with fear. "We need to show this to the sheriff," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The next day, we returned to the station with the recording. Thompson watched the video, now with a more serious expression. "This is definitely strange," he admitted. "I'll send a team to check the area and see if we can find any clues." Despite his words, the feeling of safety continued to elude us. Whoever it was becoming bolder. The letters grew more disturbing, and the calls more frequent. The constant presence of the cameras offered a fragile sense of control, but we knew we were being played in a twisted game of cat and mouse. The nights grew longer and the days heavier. Emily and I tried to maintain our routine, but the shadow of the stalker was always present, eroding our peace and sanity. Every noise in the night, every movement out of place kept us on edge. Willow Creek, which once seemed like a refuge of tranquility, was now the setting of our torment. The invasion became more personal in a way we could never have imagined. Until then, the threats and calls were enough to keep us in a constant state of alert, but nothing could have prepared us for what was to come. It all began on a seemingly normal afternoon. Emily and I decided to go for a walk in the local park, trying to reclaim some of the normality we so desperately lacked. The fresh breeze and the sound of leaves under our feet were a temporary relief from the constant surveillance that tormented us at home. When we returned, something seemed out of place. The front door was ajar, which was already a bad sign. We were sure we had locked it when we left. I entered first, with Emily right behind, and we were greeted by an unsettling silence. Everything seemed to be in order at first glance, but there was a strange feeling in the air, as if the house had been invaded. "Someone's been here," I murmured, feeling a chill run down my spine. Emily looked around, her eyes wide with fear. "How do you know?" Before I could answer, I noticed something on the living room floor. It was one of our picture frames, shattered into pieces, our photo smiling happily now torn. I picked up the shards, trying to understand what had happened. That's when Emily let out a scream. I ran to the kitchen, where she stood, pale and trembling. On the table was one of her diaries, open to a specific page with the words, "I know everything," scribbled in red letters. It was a diary she held dearly, where she recorded her most intimate thoughts. "This wasn't here when we left," she said, her voice barely audible. With every step we took through the house, we found more signs of intrusion. Drawers overturned, cabinets open, our belongings scattered as if someone had spent hours rummaging through everything. The feeling of violation was overwhelming. I rushed to check the security camera recordings, but all the files had been deleted. But the most disturbing thing was yet to come. At night, while we tried to calm down and understand what had happened, we began to notice that some of our personal items were disappearing. First, it was small things, a hairbrush, a pair of socks, a favorite mug, things that could easily be forgotten or lost. However, when these items began to reappear in strange places, the situation became even more terrifying. Emily's hairbrush showed up in the freezer. My car keys were found inside the oven. Emily's favorite mug was in the washing machine, filled with water. Each discovery was a blow to our sanity. Whoever it was, they were enjoying themselves at our expense, playing with us as if we were pieces on a board. The line between what was real and what was paranoia became increasingly thin. We showed everything to Sheriff Thompson, but he seemed perplexed. "This is more serious than I thought," he admitted. "I'll put the house under surveillance and see if we can catch whoever's doing this." Despite his promises, the sense of safety continued to elude us. Emily and I began to doubt our own sanity. Were we forgetting things? Were we imagining everything? Each day became a struggle against growing fear and uncertainty. The situation started to affect our relationship deeply. Small arguments turned into big fights, the tension eroding our trust in each other. Emily began having nightmares, waking up in the middle of the night with muffled screams. I, in turn, became increasingly obsessed with finding the stalker, spending hours monitoring the security cameras and patrolling the house. The stalker's presence was no longer just a shadow in our lives. Now, it was infiltrating our most intimate moments, turning our home, which was once a refuge, into a prison of fear and distrust. We were cornered, surrounded by an invisible enemy who always seemed one step ahead. And with each passing day, the feeling that we couldn't trust anyone grew stronger and more unbearable. The presence of the stalker was slowly corroding the foundation of our relationship. What began as a strong and loving union started to crack under the weight of distrust and paranoia. The invasions, the disappearing and reappearing objects, all of it led us to question not only the safety of our home, but also our sanity and, eventually, the trust we had in each other. The arguments started small, almost insignificant, but quickly turned into intense fights. Emily was visibly shaken, and I, trying to remain calm, often failed to ease her concerns. "Did you lock the door when we left today?" she repeatedly asked, and any hesitation in my answer was enough to trigger an outburst. "Yes, I locked the door, Emily," I would respond, trying not to raise my voice. "We have cameras, remember? We can review the recordings." But even with the cameras, the fear didn't diminish. If something moved in the house, she would shrink, her eyes wide with terror, and I, trying to be the pillar of strength, began to doubt myself. Every time I couldn't find my keys or forgot where I had left something, I felt the stalker was messing with me in a personal and perverse way. The tension was palpable. We were living in a constant state of alert, our nerves on edge. One night, after a heated argument about the increasing frequency of disturbing events, Emily turned to me, her eyes shining with anger and fear. "I can't take this anymore, John. Maybe it's you. Maybe you're doing this to drive me crazy." I was shocked by the accusation, but I couldn't help feeling a chill of doubt. What if I was doing this unconsciously? What if the stress was pushing me to a breaking point? "How could you think that of me?" I retorted, trying to hide the tremor in my voice. "I'm a victim here too." Our fights began to bring up secrets that had been buried. Small details from our past started to surface, revealing flaws and vulnerabilities we had never openly discussed. Emily mentioned a toxic relationship from her past that had left her scarred, something I vaguely knew but had never fully understood. She began to question my old friendships, insinuating that maybe I had left someone behind who was now trying to torment us. "You never told me everything about your ex," she would say, her voice full of bitterness. "What if she's behind this? What if she never got over your breakup?" I was not innocent either. During one of our arguments, I blurted out something I should never have said. "And you? Who knows if that guy from your old job, the one who always looked at you strangely, didn't decide to follow us here? You never talked much about him." Emily fell silent, her eyes filling with tears. "How could you say that? I've never hidden anything from you, John." But the truth was, we were both hiding things, not because we wanted to deceive each other, but because some secrets were easier to forget than to face. Now, with the stalker pressuring us from all sides, these secrets began to feel like evidence of betrayal. The atmosphere in our home became unbearable. We were surrounded by suspicion, every look, every gesture being interpreted in the worst possible way. I began to avoid Emily, fearing that any word spoken could trigger another fight. She, in turn, spent more time locked in the bedroom, writing in her diary or talking on the phone with distant friends, seeking comfort outside what our home had become. Each day dragged on. Each night was an endless torture. The feeling of being watched did not diminish, and the weight of the unknown was destroying us. The love that had united us was being slowly eroded, and we began to wonder if we could survive this, not just as individuals, but as a couple. The feeling of not being able to trust anyone, not even each other, was driving us to the brink of collapse. And as the fights continued and secrets were unearthed, the Stalker seemed to be always one step ahead, manipulating our fears and insecurities with cruel precision. We were trapped in a deadly game, and the line between victim and enemy was becoming increasingly blurred. Faced with the inefficiency of the police and the growing paranoia that enveloped us, Emily and I decided that the only way to uncover the truth about our stalker was to investigate on our own. Willow Creek, despite its peaceful and welcoming appearance, was a place where everyone seemed to have their own secrets. The feeling that anyone could be our pursuer drove us to delve deeper into the lives of our neighbors and the local community. We started our investigations discreetly, attending more community events and observing the people around us with a critical eye. The local fair, church gatherings, and even Emily's gardening group meetings became opportunities to search for clues. We paid attention to every detail, every suspicious look, every murmur that might provide a clue about who could be harassing us. Our first suspect fell on Mr. Thompson, the sheriff's brother and owner of the hardware store. He was a reserved man, with a penetrating gaze that seemed to follow us whenever we were in his store. One afternoon, I decided to strike up a conversation while buying some tools. "How are you, Mr. Thompson? Adjusting well to life in Willow Creek?" I asked, trying to sound casual. He looked at me, his blue eyes fixed and expressionless. "The town's been good to me, quiet. And you?" "Adjusting," I replied. "But we've had some strange incidents lately." "Incidents?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. "Phone calls in the middle of the night, anonymous letters," I continued, watching his reaction closely. "Have you heard of anything like that happening around here?" He shook his head slowly. "Not that I know of, but in small towns, everyone has their secrets. Be careful who you trust." His words, though vague, left us more uneasy. Did he know more than he was saying? Or was he just giving a generic warning? We decided not to rule him out, but we didn't have enough evidence to accuse him directly either. We continued our investigation with other people in the community. Mary Johnson, our neighbor, always seemed helpful and friendly, but I noticed she avoided certain subjects. On a visit, while we were having tea, I tried to probe her about the town's rumors. "Mary, have you ever heard of anyone having problems with stalkers around here?" I asked casually. She frowned, looking thoughtful. "Not that I remember, but, some people here aren't as friendly as they seem. There's always whispering about others." Emily, beside me, seized the opportunity. "What do you mean? Do you think someone could be trying to scare us on purpose?" Mary gave a tense smile. "Oh, I'm not saying that. Just that, well, we all have skeletons in our closets." Her answer only increased our distrust. If Mary knew something, she wasn't willing to share. This made us start observing our neighbors with more suspicion. Who else could be hiding something? During one of these investigations, we discovered something disturbing about Sheriff Thompson. While talking to some older residents, we heard stories about his past. Supposedly, he had been involved in an incident years ago that resulted in the death of a local young man. The story was hushed up, and he maintained his position in the police. Could it be possible that he had something to do with what was happening to us? As our suspicions grew, we also discovered that some of our new friends had hidden motives. Jake, a member of the book club, seemed particularly interested in our problems. He always asked detailed questions, almost as if he was collecting information. Emily began to distrust him after a particularly strange conversation. "Have you ever thought that maybe someone wants you out of here?" Jake had asked, in a tone that seemed too innocent. Then there was Sarah, from Emily's gardening group, who always seemed to know too much about our routine. Emily caught Sarah spying on our house one night, but when confronted, Sarah claimed she was just passing by. Something about her explanation didn't seem right, and since then, Emily avoided her. Our search for answers made us more paranoid, and the line between friend and enemy became increasingly indistinct. With every step we took, more questions arose and fewer answers we found. And while we investigated others, the feeling that we were being watched intensified. At any moment, it seemed the stalker was aware of our movements, always one step ahead, playing with our fears and insecurities. Willow Creek, with its facade of tranquility, was revealing itself as a labyrinth of secrets and lies. Each friendly face could hide dark intentions, and our personal investigation was taking us deeper into an abyss of paranoia and distrust. The stalker was somewhere out there, and discovering his identity could be the key to our survival or our downfall. The tension in our home reached an unbearable point. Each passing day seemed to bring a new form of torment, and the stalker was becoming increasingly bold in his actions. What had once been just phone calls and threatening letters evolved into something more sinister and violent. One particularly dark night, we were in the living room trying to relax with a movie on the TV, but the tension was palpable. Emily was nestled beside me on the couch, but we were both restless. Since the beginning of this ordeal, we couldn't find comfort in everyday activities anymore. Every noise outside, every shadow passing by the window made us jump in fright. Then we heard a loud bang at the back door. I got up quickly, my heart racing, and ran to the kitchen. The door was open, swinging in the wind, and the cold night air was invading the house. I knew I had locked that door. "Stay here, Emily," I murmured, trying to hide the panic in my voice. I grabbed a baseball bat we kept in the kitchen cabinet and approached the door, trying to see something in the darkness. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows, attacking me forcefully. I barely had time to react before feeling a painful blow to the head. I fell to the ground, my vision blurry and the muffled sound of Emily's screams echoing in the background. I fought to get up, but the figure over me was relentless, hitting me repeatedly. The pain was excruciating, and for a moment, I thought I wouldn't survive. The world around me started to fade, but then I heard Emily's voice, desperate and furious. "Get off him!" she screamed, and suddenly, the figure recoiled. The last thing I saw before passing out was Emily, holding a knife in her hands, ready to attack. When I woke up, I was lying on the couch, an ice pack on my head and Emily kneeling beside me, her eyes full of tears. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice trembling. I nodded, feeling the pain pulsing in my head. "What happened?" "I managed to scare him off," she said. "But we need help, John. This is going too far." I agreed, feeling the gravity of the situation weighing even more on us. That same night, while Emily tended to me, she found something that could change everything. She was in the bedroom, reorganizing some things that had been overturned during the attack, when she found a letter hidden under the bed. It was different from the others we received. This one seemed older, yellowed with time. She brought the letter to me, and together we read it with trembling hands. The letter contained disturbing details about Emily's past, mentioning events and people she had never shared with me. It was a window into a dark period of her life that I had completely been unaware of. But what really caught our attention was the signature at the end, MB. The discovery was crucial. Not only because it gave us a clue about the stalker's identity, but also because it revealed a secret Emily had kept from me. This brought a new layer of distrust and insecurity. How could I not have known about this person? And why had she never told me? As we dealt with this revelation, we began to piece together the puzzle. The stalker wasn't just a stranger. He had a deep connection to Emily's past, a story of obsession and resentment that had resurfaced to haunt us. The letter mentioned specific events, places, and dates that Emily vividly remembered. Every detail confirmed that whoever was pursuing us knew a lot about her and was determined to destroy us. The revelation was overwhelming, but it also gave us a focus for our investigation. We needed to confront this ghost from the past and uncover the truth before he managed to destroy us completely. That night, as we tried to rest, a new determination emerged within us. We wouldn't be passive victims of this situation. We had a vital clue, and despite the fear and emotional scars, we were ready to face our pursuer and end this nightmare once and for all. The days following the discovery of the letter were tense and filled with fear. Now we knew that our pursuer had a direct connection to Emily's past, but his identity remained a mystery. Determined to end this torment, we began planning how we could confront him. We knew we needed to be prepared for anything, as this would be the most dangerous moment of our lives. We installed more security cameras and maintained constant vigilance. Every noise, every shadow became suspicious, and the feeling of being watched never left us. We decided that if the stalker appeared again, we would be ready to confront him directly. The opportunity for the confrontation came sooner than we expected. On a stormy night, lightning lit up the sky and thunder reverberated through the house. We were in the living room, reviewing the camera footage, when we saw a shadowy figure approaching the backyard. My heart raced, and a mix of fear and determination took hold of us. "He's here?" I murmured, feeling the adrenaline course through my body. Emily nodded, her eyes fixed on the screen. "We need to be ready." I grabbed the baseball bat again, while Emily armed herself with a kitchen knife. We knew this could be a matter of life and death. We turned off the lights in the house, waiting in the darkness as we heard the intruder's steps approaching. Suddenly, the back door was forced open, and the masked figure entered. He wore a black ski mask, completely hiding his face. The tension in the air was palpable. I felt my heart pounding loudly, almost deafening in my ears. Emily squeezed my hand, and together we advanced. "Who are you?" I shouted, trying to sound braver than I felt. The stalker turned to us, a low and disturbing laugh emanating from the mask. "You'll never know," he replied, his voice distorted by the mask. He didn't wait a second before attacking. The fight was brutal and desperate. The stalker was strong and fast, moving with frightening precision. The first strike almost knocked me down, but I managed to dodge in time, swinging the baseball bat in his direction. The force of the blow was cushioned by the intruder's arm, but it caused a cry of pain. Emily, beside me, moved agilely, trying to stab him with the knife. The stalker, however, seemed to anticipate every move, skillfully dodging and counterattacking. A strong blow hit me in the stomach, throwing me against the wall. The pain was intense, but I forced myself to get up, knowing I couldn't give up. "Emily, watch out!" I shouted, seeing the stalker approach her with a blade gleaming in the lightning's light. She managed to dodge in time, her knife cutting through the air as she tried to wound our aggressor. The fight unfolded chaotically, objects being knocked over and broken as we desperately tried to defend ourselves. At a critical moment, I managed to land a solid blow on the stalker's arm, causing him to drop his knife. Emily seized the opportunity and advanced, trying to immobilize him, but the stalker was relentless, managing to break free and grabbing her by the neck. "Emily!" I ran to her, using all my strength to pull her out of the stalker's grasp. The fight intensified, both of us falling to the ground in a desperate struggle for survival. The storm outside seemed to echo our battle, the thunder and lightning mirroring the chaos inside our home. We managed to get up again, now with the advantage. Emily picked up the dropped knife and managed to cut the stalker's arm, who recoiled with a cry of pain. "You won't beat us," Emily said, her voice firm despite the visible fear in her eyes. The stalker, now visibly wounded, took a step back. "This isn't over yet," he threatened, before turning and running to the back door. We tried to follow him, but he disappeared into the night, leaving us exhausted and injured, but alive. The house was in ruins, the signs of the fight evident everywhere. We sat on the floor, panting and in shock, trying to process what had just happened. "He'll come back," Emily said, her voice weak but determined. "We need to be ready," I agreed, holding her tight. We knew the battle was far from over. The stalker was still out there, but for the first time we felt we had a chance to fight back. And we were determined not to let him defeat us. The house was still in ruins, the signs of the battle evident in every corner. The immediate sense of survival was replaced by a fierce determination to finally end this nightmare. We couldn't live in the shadow of fear any longer. We needed to uncover the stalker's identity and understand his motives. The next morning, we went to the police station with all the evidence we had gathered, including the letter Emily found and the security camera recordings. Sheriff Thompson, now visibly more concerned, assembled a team to investigate further. The recordings showed the stalker entering and leaving our home, and the letter revealed a disturbing connection to Emily's past. "We have a solid lead now," the sheriff said, analyzing the images. "We'll find out who this person is." As the investigation progressed, Emily and I continued our own search for answers. Remembering the details in the letter, we began to reconstruct the events of Emily's past that could have led to the current situation. Painful and forgotten memories resurfaced, revealing a web of obsession and resentment that had formed years ago. Then, on a rainy afternoon, we received the call that would change everything. Sheriff Thompson asked us to come to the station immediately. When we arrived, he had a grave but determined expression. "We've identified the stalker," he announced. "It's someone you knew a long time ago, Emily." The name he pronounced was a shock. It was someone Emily had briefly mentioned, an old colleague named Mark Benson. He had always been somewhat obsessive and possessive, but Emily never imagined he could have taken his obsession to such an extreme. "Apparently, he never got over the fact that you left your job and moved away," the sheriff explained. "He followed you here, determined to ruin your life." Mark Benson was found hiding in a motel on the outskirts of town. When the police raided the room, they found a disturbing collection of our photos, newspaper clippings, and a detailed diary of our every move. It was clear he had planned each step carefully, fueling his sick obsession. Benson's arrest brought immediate relief, but the scars left by his stalking were deep. Emily and I watched as he was taken away in handcuffs, his cold and empty gaze fixed on us. "This isn't over yet," he muttered as he passed us. "I'll be back." His words sent a chill through us, but we knew we were finally free. Benson was charged with several offenses, including trespassing, stalking, and assault. His trial was swift, and he was sentenced to a long prison term. However, the process left an indelible mark on our lives. The following months were a time of rebuilding. We went to therapy, trying to understand and overcome the trauma we had lived through. Our marriage, which had been stretched to its limit, began to heal slowly. Trust, though shaken, was being rebuilt step by step. Willow Creek, the town we sought as a haven of peace, became the setting for our worst nightmare, but also the place where we found our strength. The community supported us, offering help and understanding as we tried to resume our lives. Although Mark Benson was behind bars, the shadow of his obsession still loomed over us. We knew it would take time for complete peace to be restored, but we were determined to move forward. The experience taught us the value of resilience and mutual support. We learned that, even in the darkest moments, we could count on each other to face fear and uncertainty. Our home, once a battlefield, now began to feel like a home again. Each repair, each object put back in place was a step toward normalcy. And as we looked to the future, we knew that despite the scars, we were stronger and more united than ever. The true identity of the Stalker and his disturbing motives were finally revealed, bringing closure to our horror story. The legal consequences ensured he would not bother us again, but the experience left a lasting mark on us. We learned to live with the scars, using them as a reminder of the strength and courage we found in each other amid the chaos. And so, amid the challenges and recovery, Emily and I moved forward, determined to build a life of peace and love, free from the shadow of fear that once nearly destroyed us. And if you like this story, subscribe to the channel and be sure to watch the next story that is now playing on the screen.